But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
Dark Knight with a vengeance! The Batman face punches his way back into theaters, launching a whole new movie timeline for the Caped Crusader, and this one is dark, violent, gritty as hell, and somehow still PG-13. Directed by Matt Reeves, this take on the world's greatest detective sets up a whole new status quo for Gotham City, and we'll break all that down, plus what it means for the future, and there's a secret villain reveal in this movie, and we got Matt Reeves to confirm it himself and tell us all about it, so come listen to his words for the real story. But before we get into all that, we have to warn you, we are about to spoil this whole movie, plus where we think everything's headed, so if you haven't seen it yet or you don't want to hear us speculate, now would be the best time to fire up that Batmobile for a nice evening drive until we're done here.
Justice. The answer's justice.
Okay, now that we're past the spoiler warning, let's get right to the main takeaways. It's time to strap in, atomic batteries to power, turbines to speed. Let's start at the end. Of course, Batman defeats Paul Dano's Riddler, but not before revealing that Thomas and Martha Wayne had deep ties to Carmine Falcone's crime family and share some responsibility for Gotham's current state. Well, Gotham's current state's a little more complicated because the Riddler also blows out Gotham's seawall, which floods the whole city and cuts it off from the rest of civilization, and that's how we leave Gotham at the end of the movie. Also at the end of the movie, while locked up in Arkham, Riddler meets a very smiley chap in the next cell over, and you guessed it, it's the Joker. And yes, we're saying definitively that was the Joker, played by Barry Keoghan. We got director Matt Reeves to confirm that for us, so make sure you stick around and we'll show you exactly what we mean. When the movie ends, Batman and Catwoman go their separate ways for now, and Batman is left to figure out how to save his city after the havoc Riddler just wrought on it. Okay, I know that was a literal and figurative deluge of information, so let's unpack it. Let's start with what Riddler just did to Gotham. By flooding the city and cutting it off from most of the civilized world, Riddler basically set up no man's land, something that we've seen repeatedly in Batman comics, movies, and video games. Batman and Catwoman help evacuate most of Gotham's civilians from the arena, but now what's left is a self-contained city where all of the craziness it's known for is trapped inside, where it will only fester and become more of a problem this new Batman has to deal with. And like I said, we've seen this concept before. Batman Comics had No Man's Land back in 1999, which cut the city off from the world thanks to a massive earthquake. DC Comics 2013's Batman Zero Year also included elements of a wrecked and isolated Gotham as a young Batman rallies to save what's left of the city. And of course, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns take on Gotham played with the idea after a nuclear blast EMP caused a massive blackout for everywhere, Gotham included.
This place is dangerous. I like it.
2011's Arkham City explored this idea too, thanks to Hugo Strange's machinations trapping Batman on the island with his greatest foes. Or actually, I'm pretty sure they were trapped in there with him. Of course, Tom Hardy's Bane basically did the same thing in 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, cutting Gotham off from the rest of the world and holding it hostage with yet another mega dangerous piece of Wayne Industries tech that Lucius Fox let fall into the wrong hands, which is something that kind of happened a lot. We're going to see Matt Reeves' Gotham again real soon. There are 2 HBO Max series in development, one starring Jeffrey Wright's Lieutenant Jim Gordon focusing on Gotham PD, and another starring and focusing on Colin Farrell's Penguin. Penguin and the remaining Gotham criminal element will take advantage of the power vacuum created by the death of Carmine Falcone in this whole flooded no man's land situation, and we're very likely going to see that explored in those 2 series, assuming they make it to air. Back to the Riddler. Yes, he's patterned after the real-life Zodiac Killer, and he's a dark mirror of Batman, or even darker mirror of Batman, because he's also out for vengeance. As far as he's concerned, Gotham let him down, and he even thinks of Batman as being on his side until the very end. An orphan just like Bruce, Edward Nashton unleashes his rage on the city, killing public leaders and taunting the police Zodiac Killer style. This all culminates in the final battle when Riddler is already behind bars in Arkham and the bombs trigger and blow out the seawall. A group of survivors are forced into a Madison Square Garden-style arena where Riddler reveals that there were actually a bunch of Riddlers who were basically a group of edgelords the actual Riddler recruited through 4chan or his private Twitch channel or his subreddit or Patreon or whatever he has. We don't actually know if these stand-in Riddlers were also involved in the real Riddler's other killings, but they're a big part of the final crescendo. They all appear in the arena rafters with hunting rifles, and just to say, this whole scene made a lot of us squirm in our seats because a lot of really scary real-life parallels are happening here. Anyway, Batman defeats these bootleg Riddlers as well and saves the group of survivors by leading them out and getting them evacuated, but Gotham is still lost and he's going to stick around and help Gordon fight the good fight. Vengeance is Batman's literal nickname in this movie, and it might as well be Riddler's too, since it's just the same thing he was after, just from a somehow even more f***ed up point of view than Batman. Vengeance is also really the theme of this movie, and how in the end, vengeance ultimately serves no one.
I'm vengeance. You got a lot of cats.
I have a thing about strays.
As advertised, the film takes place after Bruce has been doing the Batman thing for about 2 years, and it still feels like he's getting the feel for a lot of his gear. Real quick, speaking of gear, Batman uses these high-tech contact lenses to record what he sees, but that's really the most futuristic gadget that he uses in the movie. Everything else has a kind of low-tech, homemade quality to it. Case in point, his badass muscle car Batmobile and his somewhat less badass glider suit. We saw a snippet of this scene in the trailers, and it kind of echoes the moment that Bruce uses the memory cloth cape in Batman Begins, but this tech is even more grounded this time. Kind of literally. He doesn't use the cape to glide, he uses an inflatable wingsuit before jumping off of a building, and then he uses an actual parachute, just like a base jumper would, but then he biffs the landing, which kind of makes the whole thing feel even more real world and, like I said, grounded. This isn't Batman Year One, but Bruce is definitely still kind of new at this, and he's still trying to navigate the world of hyper-violent nocturnal vigilantism. He's also still figuring out his relationship to Lieutenant Jim Gordon, a good cop, just like always, who is withstanding more and more scrutiny from his department, and who begins to rely on the Batman more and more to solve his cases. There's that great scene where just before Batman uses his dorky glider suit, where Gordon and Batman are stuck together in a holding cell, and Batman has to fake punch Gordon to escape. The punch is very much not fake, but the scene is great. There's a lot of good Batman-Gordon stuff in this one. Anyway, along with the devastation that Riddler leaves Gotham to deal with, he also reveals that Thomas and Martha Wayne had dealings with Carmine Falcone, and then they were murdered, and tons of money they had donated to help the city basically fell into the hands of gangsters like Falcone and the unseen Sal Maroni. Batman has a pretty close relationship with Zoe Kravitz's Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, that's her secret identity, who has a big family secret of her own. Just like in some of the comics, Selina reveals that Carmine Falcone is actually her biological father, which kind of explains her fixation on Falcone through most of the film. Maroni, you see, is cooling his heels in federal prison after somebody turned rat to federal prosecutors, helping them lock him away after a big RICO trial that we don't actually get to see. And who is the rat? Carmine Falcone, of course. He gets outed as the guy who ratted on Sal Maroni, sending him to prison. Probably a problem with the mob that he broke Omerta, but Riddler snipes him and kills him before anyone can make a big deal out of it, so problem solved, I guess. Anyway, Catwoman helps Batman track down and take out the Riddler at the end, and she says she's heading off to the nearby city of Bloodhaven. Yeah, we know, we'll talk about that in a second. Selina tries to get Batman to come with her, as they clearly have the connection. We know they eventually develop in the comics, but at this point, Batman has a mission to think of, so he and Catwoman part ways, literally driving off in opposite directions.
It's a funny world we live in. Speaking of which, you know how I got these scars?
So, about that scene in Arkham Asylum at the end, that is the Joker that Riddler was joking around with in there. Like, that's not a joke. We have this confirmed from director Matt Reeves himself. And honestly, he told us a ton about him, so I'll shut up. Let's let him do the talking.
You know, because the movie is not an origin tale for Batman, but it's his early days, it really is an origin tale for the Rogues Gallery's characters. And the scene is not meant to be there to say, like, oh, here's an Easter egg. The next movie is X. Like, I don't know that the Joker would be in the next movie, but I can tell you that here's what you're seeing is an early days version of this character, and trouble, as always, is brewing in Gotham. You know, in the comics, these characters often declare their alter egos in response to the fact that there's a Batman out there. And so here we have a Joker who's not yet the Joker. I wanted to create an iteration of him that felt distinctive and new, but went right back to the roots. So he's kind of very much out of the Conrad Veidt sort of mold. And that idea of the silent film of the man who laughs, he's got this congenital disease, he can never stop smiling. And I was like, well, maybe there's something here where it's not something where he fell in a vat of chemicals, or it's not the Nolan thing where he has these scars and we don't know where they came from. What if this is something that he's been touched by from birth, and that he has a kind of congenital disease that refuses to let him stop smiling, and he's had this very dark reaction to it, and it's made him, he's had to spend a life of people looking at him in a certain way. This idea of him being very kind of incisive and brilliant and being able to get into your mind and basically having this kind of nihilistic point of view that sort of like from his inception, from his birth, life has been a cruel joke on him, and this is his response, and he's eventually going to declare himself as a clown, declare himself as the Joker. That was sort of the idea. In this moment, now that the stranglehold of Falcone has been broken, it means that there is a moment of not only hope, but it's also the moment of greatest danger in the city in a long time, because it means that everyone is going to grab for power. And that's just one sort of example of how trouble in Gotham is never going to subside. There's always going to be somebody with a plan afoot.
And there you have it, straight from the source. That was the Joker, and he's not necessarily in the next movie or in the HBO series, but he already exists in this version of Gotham, so where's he going to pop up next? And with that, it is time for the Easter eggs that we found in this one, and unfortunately none of these eggs are related to the greatest Batman villain of all time.
That was a slimy trick, you rotten egg.
Of course, Batgirl. I have a patent on slimy tricks.
Batman and Robin famously concealed the secret Batcave entrance with a Shakespeare statue in the iconic 60s series, and there was a Shakespeare statue in plain sight in this version of Wayne Manor. No confirmation, though, on whether or not there's a button hidden inside of it. Oh, and if it was weird to see Dory, that elderly woman, answer the phone instead of Alfred, that's been done before, too. Remember Aunt Harriet from the 60s TV series, when Bruce and Dick were always giving her super sketchy explanations of how they spent their time together? We don't know that the character in the Batman was a direct reference to Aunt Harriet, but we hope that Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne has some good excuses chambered ready to go in case she starts getting nosy. If Joker isn't the villain of the next movie, here is our best guess. Hush. Because there's a big Hush reference early in the movie as a newspaper refers to a reporter who was murdered to cover up the whole Thomas Wayne Falcone connection. The reporter's name was Edward Elliot, which would probably make him Tommy's father, as Thomas Elliot, aka Hush, would be about the same age as Bruce. There's also a teeny tiny call out that could be a reference to the Court of Owls from Batman comics. There's an owl on one of the final notes that Riddler leaves behind. If Riddler is so clued into buried secrets of Gotham's elite, chances are that he would have crossed paths with the owls, who could be secretly working in shadows deeper and darker than anything that this Batman has lurked in himself at this point. Catwoman gives Carmine Falcone a nasty scratch to remember her by for the 15 minutes until he gets murdered anyway. The scratch is a reference to the scar that Falcone has in the comics, which is also a gift from Catwoman. The comic scar first appeared in Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's Batman Year One, and then again in Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Batman The Long Halloween. And if for some reason you haven't read these, that should definitely be your next order of business after seeing this movie, because they're awesome and the movie borrowed a lot from them. Is Batman a Venom junkie? Near the end of the film, when the fighting is going completely bonkers, Batman takes a bunch of gunfire to his body armor and almost goes down, but then he injects himself with a bright glowing substance that he pulled out of his utility belt. Now, unless he turns into a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, we're going to assume that that was Venom, the compound famously known for turning Bane into a hulked out badass. So I guess Bane could also show up in the next one. Then again, it could have also just been your regular industrial grade sour apple flavored EpiPen. That Bloodhaven reference. Catwoman says she's probably headed there after the credits roll. Bloodhaven, of course, is another fictional city from DC Comics that is supposedly pretty close to Gotham geographically and is just as fucked up and crime-ridden. Nightwing, aka Dick Grayson, aka Grown-Up Robin, makes Bloodhaven his base of operations at one point in the comics, and one of the usernames that popped up in the Riddler's Twitch chat was Bloodhaven the band, probably no relation. Anyway, speaking of Robins, Jay Lycurgo, who played Tim Drake in Titans, gets a first-row seat to watching Batman beat the absolute dog piss out of a clown-faced gang member early in the movie. There's also a reference to the Safdie brothers film Good Time, starring Robert Pattinson. The Batman director Matt Reeves credits Good Time as the movie that made him think Robert Pattinson would work as Bruce Wayne, and if you haven't seen Good Time, get on that. Oh, and by the way, there is technically a post-credits scene, but it doesn't really give you much to go on. It's just a computer screen with the Riddler's question mark in green, without a high-tech bat computer. To analyze it, that's all we got to go on. Obviously, Riddler is still alive, but he's locked up in Arkham. But if there's anything we know about Arkham, it's that nobody really seems to stay there very long. I don't know who's running the place, not doing a very good job. Speaking of Arkham, it is revealed that Martha Wayne was also in Arkham before she married Thomas, and then she also spent some time in the family institution because she battled some mental health issues of her own before her untimely death. And it seems very feasible that her son might have inherited some of those issues.
You know, you really could be doing more for this city. Your family has a history of philanthropy, but as far as I can tell, you're not doing anything.
This line about a billionaire doing nothing might very well be a reference to our very own real-world billionaires who seem to be more concerned with vanity space projects than, you know, actually doing anything to help out the world in any real way.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Wrong, Alfred, but you get the idea. What did you think of the Batman, and where does the story go from here, and when are we going to see this mysterious Joker next? Let's hear your best theories down in the comments below. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Canon Fodder. For more Batman, we ranked every movie Batsuit on a scale of rubber nipples to carbon fiber, so check that out if you want, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.
I got you!